Mm-hmm.
So I guess we are now live. So very, very exciting. We're allowing people a minute to kind of trickle in as we get started with our discussion and get people a little bit of time to get the link ready to go. So just bear with us.
Share this out to your pages, guys. What's
Yeah,
going on? What's going on? What
Let
is
it go
going
viral.
on? Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think we'll actually just get started, and we'll take it slow with some introductions. I just want to tell everyone, hi, myself. I'll be the moderator today for today's discussion on diversity and inclusion in diving. We're here with Patty, and I myself am Xochitl Clare. I'm a marine scientist and a performing artist here, based in California, and I do a lot of outreach and education. So it's such an honor to be here with some fantastic panelists who can really share and provide some insight on these topics, which we know are so very important. And I guess what we'll do is we'll go around, we'll share a little bit about where we are and what we do. I'll start first with the first person on my screen that I see, Weldon. Why don't you give us a little bit about what you're up to and where you are now currently.
Wow. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. If you're on the live, hello. If you're watching the replay, that's dope. Welcome to the chat. My name is Weldon Wade. I'm a Bermudian in Bermuda right now. I'm a PADI ambassador diver, so it's wonderful to be on this platform and part of the PADI family in this very special way. I'm a communications coordinator for a program called the Bermuda Ocean Prosperity Program. I serve as founder of an organization called Guardians of the Reef. I do some commercial diving and marine contracting. I hunt invasive species here, and I love educating kids in Bermuda and across the region about the threats to the ocean and to the aquatic environment. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. And if you don't know where Bermuda is, we can cover all that in a minute if you want.
Fantastic. And everyone, you can see that we do have some folks have their handles, their Instagram handles in their name. That's a great way to get in touch and to learn more about what everyone's doing here. So let's hear from Alexa. Why don't you tell us where you are and what you're up to these days?
Thanks, Xochitl. I don't know how I'm going to follow up after Weldon. But yes, my name is Alexa, or most people also know me as AJ. I'm a Filipino-Canadian dive master, and I'm here in Mexico at the moment. For full time, I work for a company called Access Now. I do community management for it, where we kind of like discover, rate, and like review accessible places like worldwide.
Absolutely wonderful. And I guess we'll wrap up introductions with Cody. Why don't you tell us about where you are and what you're up to?
Okay. Well, I totally forgot to put my Instagram handle, but I'm sure you can search and find me. But anyways, my name is Cody Unser. I too am a PADI ambassador diver, a very proud PADI ambassador diver. I'm also a member of the Women Divers Hall of Fame, which was really exciting. I'm the first disabled woman to be inducted into that. So I became paralyzed about 22 years ago due to transverse myelitis, which is an autoimmune disorder. And after that, my mom and I started the Cody Unser First Step Foundation, where we do a lot of awareness, advocacy, and then, of course, quality of life is our scuba program. So I'm really excited to be here. It is Disability Pride Month. It's also PADI Women Dive Day on this Saturday. So this is so cool to be able to do this with all of you. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, and as Cody mentioned, you should really check out, I think we also know that you have a documentary coming up soon. Already out, Sea of Change?
Yeah,
yes.
Sea of Change. Basically, we documented the first ever scuba study on the paralyzed body. So I really kind of encouraged my doctors at Johns Hopkins, because I started feeling my bladder more and my legs more at depth. And so, but that's been out, but I'm really excited for the future and to work with PADI to kind of be more inclusive, because without, diverse group of people at the table, then, we can't move forward. So But yeah, so that's been out. But yeah, thanks for mentioning it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we're all there with you, Cody. And I myself, as a Patty ambassador, couldn't agree more that diversity and inclusion is something that we do need to prioritize. And I think that's a good way to segue into our first kind of question that we'll just have everyone share. What does diversity and inclusion mean to you? And I think I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I'm sure everyone has been thinking a lot about this lately. And for those of us who have been doing work in diversity and inclusion for many, many years, I think now we're being brought to a space where we're reconsidering what that means moving forward. And I know all of you are very experienced in that. So why don't we'll come back to you, Weldon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what diversity and inclusion means to you?
You know, I want to take it back to when I first started diving over 10 years ago, right here in Bermuda. It was a bucket list item for me. And I actually did leave Bermuda to move to Canada for a while, but I came back, obviously. And I want to share, because I was thinking about this on my scooter ride, home to be on this live with you guys. In the early days, getting into scuba diving, trying that first dive out of Blue Water Divers up at Somerset Bridge here. It was just a wonderful experience, seeing the ocean, putting my eyes underwater for the first time and getting down, 30 feet down and looking around and interacting with all the fish and seeing all the life. And at that time, like inclusion and diversity wasn't sort of a thing to me at the time. I was just very, very new to the sport. I did a, discover scuba diving course. So it was fine. Like that was great. It wasn't until I sort of got more into the sport and started to make diving a lifestyle and not just scuba, but, free diving, snorkeling, rebreather, the whole bit, because I just used the right tool for the job, if that makes sense. But as I started to explore the sport more and dive with more of the dive shops and do more traveling across the region, including Mexico, I would just notice that oftentimes no one else on the boat looked like me. And then oftentimes I would be mistaken for crew, or oftentimes, I feel like I'm the old man in the room. I say that respectfully. But then, it was like I was the youngest on the boat, and I was just questioning, as I started to progress, why was this the reality? And I've learned over time, especially in trying to establish change. By way of forming my own organization to try to bring, more Black and brown people together to get into the sport. And it's numerous obstacles in the way. I mean, it's an expensive form of recreation, and there's a lot of work to be done. But I want to say early on that diversity and inclusion to me is there's things that follow that, and for me it would be leadership and ownership and representation as well. It's sort of more to it that I'd love to broaden later on, but we definitely need more people in leadership and ownership to sort of make that the diversity and inclusion have a bit more meat and potatoes, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That's an excellent point. Leadership and ownership. Alexa, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's really important to have that representation. Like for me as well as like a Filipino Canadian, like I don't really see anybody as much that, when I'm, especially here in Mexico, I was like, I don't really see myself out here. But like representation matters. But I feel like diversity and inclusion go so much more beyond that. And, it's about amplifying those voices and making sure that there are equal opportunities for everyone to be themselves, to take part, and to show their potential and whatever their ability is, right? And it's really about celebrating those differences and acknowledging that without those differences, we're actually limited if you think about it. It's these differences that make us so much more greater and so much more powerful and able to share different stories and showcase different parts of the world. So there's so much I think that we can learn from each other.
100%.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I guess I just want to close out with you, Cody, on this question in terms of how maybe have you rethought about this, as we're kind of going through I would say a re-enlightenment on this moving forward. For you, has anything new come up?
Yeah, good question. So I guess for me, inclusion means possibility, Like when I first became paralyzed, like I felt like I had zero possibilities for the rest of my life. I have a paralyzed body, you know, that doesn't work all that well, right? I can't walk. So there's things that I can't do. You know, I can't walk, I can't stand, I can't run like many other people with disabilities. But hey, guess what? I can scuba dive. And so the first time I did it, I mean, it saved my life. My older brother, Al, really kind of told my mom, Cody's really depressed. Like, we need to do something. This is really not okay. So when I first learned how, it was awesome because it was the first time that I was challenged by something other than the challenge of the wheelchair, the paralysis. And I mean, the wetsuit is hard to get on for everybody, but for people with disabilities, it's extra hard. Learning the equipment. I don't wear fins, but I do wear webbed gloves. So that's what I love about the sport, is that it really kind of, it allows for adaptability. And because of that, I think it does allow for more of a diverse group of people to go scuba diving, and especially those for with disabilities. But the first time I did it, and got certified, it was my answer to everything. It was the catalyst that kind of launched me into life and into doing, because I gave up. Like, I was like, I don't want to live like this. Like, what's the point? There's nothing to do, you know? But once I did it, I was like, what was I complaining about? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, there's so much to life. Like, I'm a scuba diver now. And that's exactly why we started a quality of life program, part of my foundation. And I will say that I love it when companies like Patty kind of embrace diversity and inclusion, especially those for people with disabilities, because it brings us to the conversation. You know, it kind of, I felt left out. Like, a lot of people, like you were talking about, Weldon, like you get labeled as something, or, you know, just because of the way you look, you get limited. Your options are limited. But when industries actually include you, then, you know, the world is everyone's oyster, basically. And it's, you know, it's so important for companies to really bring cultures, races, abilities to the table to really have these kind of discussions.
100%. Even in the teaching guides and on the website, and you know, across social, which I've seen a huge transformation from Patty in just being more diverse and inclusive with just the materials. And it matters, right? When you're going through the open water guide and you're looking like, oh wow, you know, it's good, these things stand out, and many people might seem like oblivious, but it is a big deal.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely. I think kind of, Weldon, would you be able to talk a little bit more about that? Because I think we're kind of getting there. You mentioned previously about how financial barriers can be really big for many people. I know that that's something for me. I definitely experienced that. Not only just growing up in California, but sometimes access to the ocean, even when you live in a coastal environment.
I totally get that.
That's a big deal. And you know, I want to just share with everyone, like, Bermuda's this very tiny island where in the middle of the Atlantic, we have no neighbors. We're about 700 nautical miles off the east coast of the Carolinas of the US. We got, you know, seaweed all around us in the Atlantic Ocean. And it's you know, the beach is never more than a mile away. We've got some award-winning beaches that are super, super close. So you would think, like, okay, every Bermudian must know how to swim, dive, have a boat, ride horses. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know when I moved to Toronto and I was making new friends, they're like, why would you leave, you know, Bermuda? It must be a very beautiful place and you must have all these wonderful things, which it is. That's not my point. My point is, there are barriers that I found as a child growing up in Bermuda that weren't even economic. It was this fear. And at least in my generation, I'm 43 years old. We were taught, like, there's monsters in the water. You know, if you go in the water, something's gonna attack you, right? The Bermuda Triangle, right? I mean, we do have some sea monsters. We know them all by name. They're lurking around trying to snatch airplanes and stuff. But once you get to know those monsters, like, everything's fine after that. I'm kidding, guys. But it's there's this fear of just access to the ocean. Sometimes it's for creatures, or there's a spiritual connection to the ocean where it's reserved for or spiritual healers and that. But my first living memory is my dad tossing me into the ocean, and that's how I learned how to swim. I survived, thankfully. Once you get past those barriers and you grab a mask, snorkel, and fins and put your eyes underwater and see the wonders below, and you want to explore that and take it up as a hobby, without question, the gear is expensive, the training is expensive, traveling is expensive, but and this is just what I've lived by for a while is, once you spend 50,000, you stop counting, really. But no, for those of you watching this live or on the replay that are like looking at the financial side or want to like drill down into it, what I've found is even those with financial means in the sport, and I struggle from time to time myself, it's really the being on the boat and not being engaged, feeling alone, feeling that there's no one you can relate to, that will push away even those that do have the financial means to engage in the sport, right? If you don't feel welcomed or part of the pod, if you will, when you're on a boat full of 25 other divers and you're at the stern and no one's engaging you because you're the young person, or you're the young black kid on the boat that is just isolated off. And I've seen this, I've been this. It gets tough. So that was one of the motivators for me to say, look, let me get more involved on this front to be on the boat when I don't necessarily want to be, because I know, like, by me being on deck, it may open up opportunities for others on the boat to engage. And I'll go out of my way sometimes to just approach and have conversations. And shout out to all the dope staff and crew that work for the dive shops around the region that I've been. But it's a lot. It is a lot. It's expensive. But my cousin plays golf professionally. I got friends that are equestrians. I got friends that race speedboats. There's a lot of other sports that are just as expensive, if not more so. So it's about looking at the other barriers, and that kind of speaks to the discussion we're having today about the diversity and inclusion in the sport, but it's hobby, sport, lifestyle. It's a lot of different ways to slice it, and I think it's for me, it's certainly become a lifestyle.
Yes, definitely. And before we move on to the final couple topics that we'll have with our time is just zipping on by. It seems like we're having just a great discussion. I guess I do want to have a moment where at the very end, we'll ask, we'll tell audiences, some things that we can actually put to action, those that are listening, to make the dive industry more inclusive. And, Weldon, you're pointing out a very important thing that you mentioned very early on, which is leadership. Having someone who is an ally, maybe they're not of the same background as you, but they provide an environment that is welcoming. Diving can be physically taxing. And so I think that when we have those people there, I know I've had many, many allies along the way, not all of my same background, but those that did the same thing of saying, hey, do you need help with that tank? Right. Sure. How was it? How was it for you when you were done? We all just don't dissipate and leave. We have the community, and we need the leaders of the community to really stay in diving. And thank you, Weldon, for all the work that you're doing to do that. And
we're all here.
Alexa, I think I was just wondering, because I know that there's probably other people in the other audience, and you mentioned being of Filipino background, and representation is critical.
Yeah.
So for you, how have you kind of persevered and stayed encouraged and on the path?
For me, I think so. I'll give you a little brief. Like, I kind of stopped diving for like 7 years. And because it was like, I moved to Canada and it was expensive. And then I just got back into it like 2 years ago. And I'm just like kind of slowly figuring out like, this is it for me. And I think the thing that's making, as you said, like making me want to stay in this community and to keep pushing is actually the people that I get to surround myself with. And a lot of them are like women. Like, I typically hang out with a lot of like guy friends, but like growing up, but now like just the past year, like being here in Mexico, I made so many like friends that are like women and just in the industry that are elevating the space, from like marine biologists, and underwater photographers, and they're all women, and they're women that I can really look up to. And it's just, like, I think that's the thing that I want to be I want to learn from them and I want to be like them, or if anything, like I can hopefully also represent my own country at some point and, be like that. And for at least like the people that I've seen here in Mexico, it's just been so amazing. So I'll definitely say it's the community and the support from fellow divers and fellow women.
Yeah, for
absolutely.
Sure. I second
Go ahead,
that.
Cody. It seems like you have something to share on that.
I think, the power of women, like, I don't know, like, it's just, difference between men and women, like, we do have more of a community sense or, friendships that we hold on to really tightly, but support, like, it's awesome to see other women diving, it's a really big kind of, it's just really awesome to have that support system and to share, knowledge, not just dive, but also about life and, science and stuff like that. Like, I really look up to Sylvia Earle and other women that have done great, amazing things, like being able to map out the ocean. And so I think women, we totally rock. We totally rock.
I second that. I love women. I love seeing women on the boat, and shout out to Sylvia. Much respect.
Yes. And Weldon, I think it'd be really great for our listeners who are, not women to know a little bit about what it's like supporting young ladies and, what can, folks do to really kind of push that. And I know that you do a lot of that. So, why don't you just talk to folks about that?
I mean, in terms of like engaging young people and keeping young people in the sport, I do want to sidebar that a lot of my work over the past 10 years has been keeping young adults engaged. I sort of looked at Bermuda in a sort of a holistic look, and I realized that kids from, I guess, 0 to around 18 are pretty much taken care of with local programs here. But then once you become an adult, you're kind of on your own. So my organization facilitates purposeful diving events to help, put everything you've invested in the sport, the gear, the training, the traveling, replacing lost, stolen, and misplaced kit. I mean, it goes on and on. Keep them engaged. And for young people, what's been the most rewarding is, taking diving from underwater sightseeing, which is dope, into doing, baseline coral mapping, picking up marine debris with onion and potato sacks, culling invasive species, underwater photography and videography. There's so much that you can do once you've got those tools. And I've found that just by diving with a purpose, you're able to keep, young and old people like myself, like engaged in the sport. Whether or not you go to the same dive site over and over again, there's always something new that you can expect to see. But when you can sort of say, okay, well, I did a 2-tank dive trip with this operator, and we had a wonderful time, but I also had my trash bag, like strap-on thigh thing, and like picked up trash, and we were calling invasive lionfish, so we got like the dinner that we can cook up, tonight, free, and so it's a lot that can be done wherever you are in the world to try to craft diving to be more than the sort of just down and looking around kind of thing. But being on a boat with young people is, it's to me, like, I get this sort of starstruck because I don't see that often. Like, I don't dive with people on the boat that are under 18. They all tend to be salt and pepper haired older guys and gals that are out having a wonderful time, and that's fantastic. But when I'm on the boat with a youth diver, it's like I'm looking at them, I'm like, I'm not a weirdo, I'm just happy that you're on the boat, because I just don't see that very often. So I love engaging young people and kids. Yeah,
absolutely. And I was just getting starry-eyed hearing you talk about it. And I think that going into specifically what can men do and what role can they play, I will say that starting off with diving, I didn't really have as many female role models. It was those encouraging comments. I don't think we can undersell those, as we sometimes think they're just a little, it's just a pat on the back. No, it really does mean a lot. Whenever I've had my male mentors say, I've seen an improvement in this. Wow, it seemed like it was a hard day even for me, but you were there and you were keeping up. And I think that vulnerability sometimes that we get from our male instructors, those golden egg moments, I really do hold on to. And my male instructor said something that kind of resonated with me emotionally. you know, and I hear a lot of questions that are coming about, you know, and Cody, you do a lot of work in this too, in terms of the psychology and the way that we can really connect. And sometimes it's just so natural. We don't even notice it when we're doing it well. So yeah, such great answers. But I do think we do need to circle back, because I think there's some people in the comments that have some questions in terms of, you know, say someone is in the perspective from their experience that, you know, there aren't any barriers in their mind into getting into scuba diving. Is this conversation necessary? So I think, because we spend a lot of time thinking about this, it might seem pretty clear, but how would we begin to explain that just to the general, you know, person who might not necessarily see these barriers?
Wow, that's a great question. Man, I think with everything, right? Like we don't put ourselves in other people's shoes very often. You know, I think we kind of, we live our lives, our individual lives, you know, through our own eyes kind of thing. But that's what I think what diving provides is actually this network. And you get to dive with, you know, when you go on a boat, you meet strangers, right? Like from different backgrounds and cultures. But the barriers are there, like regardless of, you know, where you are, how much money you make, what you look like, especially for people with disabilities. I mean, the barriers are enormous when it comes to diving. So, you know, we should definitely appreciate everybody's stories and backgrounds. I think a little bit more. And I think diving does provide that environment, that opportunity. So, but that's an interesting question. Those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Does anyone else have any other thoughts on this?
I mean, I don't know. I see the question, and I read it a couple of times, and you know, I just think whether or not it's a diversity or inclusion barrier, you know, there are certainly, you know, levels to the sport. I know most of the time when I rock up to a new dive shop in another country, because in Bermuda everybody knows everybody, so you can show up, and you know, everyone just knows who you are. But going somewhere where nobody knows anyone, you know, you're sort of judged right away. Hey, you know, people's checking out your gear and, you know, seeing what camera you've got and seeing how you gear up, and they're asking how many dives you did, and okay, you're a beginner diver, you go with those guys who do the shallow stuff, and you know, okay, you're advanced, you do the deeper stuff, you go over there. So I just think, like, in leveling up in the sport, there are things you need to, you know, you need to grow and experience certain things and level up, if you will. But like, in terms of diversity and inclusion, it's definitely like there are barriers, right? Like you're gonna ultimately bump into something at some point along the journey, regardless of what sport you're in. You can always get, you know, just circling back to my cousin being a golfer, right? You can always get better clubs. If you can't afford those better clubs, then, you know, Tiger Woods doesn't use clubs that you can just buy off the rack, right? So as you start to grow and evolve, and then in the sport, and especially if you want to go deeper, longer, and not make any bubbles, then you're going to find, ooh, that rebreather is an expensive piece of kit. Maybe I don't have, you know, $15,000 to grab that. But so it is what it is. I think we all love the sport, you know, and that's you know, one of the reasons we're here is we love it, and we show that we love it, and we let the world know in our own special ways how much we do love diving, and we're here to promote and advocate for diversity and inclusion in the sport, and ownership, leadership, representation. So I'm just super excited. I probably went a little bit off to the left, but
no, I think that was really great. And I'm sorry to cut you there, Cody. I just do want to get to this audience question.
Yeah, go for it.
In terms of, so I think we're kind of circling around this question, but not exactly pinning it down. So let's just get a bullet point list right now. How can we support people? You know, I think people really want to know. Like, they just want to know, in my shoes, what can I do? We mentioned leadership. We mentioned providing, you know, environmental kind of, you know, really setting the stage in terms of tone and how we deal with divers that are underrepresented. So specifically, I want, let's say if some, we have Elena here saying, I'd love to hear from us. Like, how can we support underprivileged members, underrepresented members? We mentioned events as well. Specifically, any other thoughts on that to add to our bullet point list?
I guess for me, I definitely want to encourage kind of the whole leadership conversation as well, but definitely encourage dive stores and dive operators to have somebody on staff that's able to teach scuba diving to somebody with a disability. Because I honestly think that, my organization is awesome. And there's other great organizations out there that really do help with adaptive scuba diving. But I envision a world where no matter where you live, you can call up your local dive store. And even if you have a disability, there's someone on staff that can teach you and train you and get you certified. So making diving more accessible, I think, worldwide is a really, you shouldn't have to rely on a nonprofit like mine to be able to go diving. You should be able to call up any PADI dive store and be totally hooked up into the world. So, and I think, PADI's definitely on the right direction doing this. And I've hooked up with my local dive store here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the scuba company, to be able to really help here locally. But I'm definitely wanting to go nationwide and help more people with disabilities get into the ocean.
Cool.
That's awesome. And I guess another question just on that note, Cody, for those who are kind of starting that process, you mentioned kind of getting in touch with the local dive shop, but for those facing a wide, disabilities or can be wide and varied in how the person is experiencing that. So what's a really good step? Sophie's asking for, encouraging, just sometimes even that, encouragement is the first step. So how do we get that going? And in your experience, what has that been like with people? That's kind of, when I first started diving, that was our first struggle when we started the quality of life program is, all right, well, where are the dive instructors out here that are able to train somebody with a disability? Because that, again, we're not one size fits all. I have a spinal cord injury, autoimmune disorder, but my needs and adaptability to the sport are different from somebody who's an amputee, say, for example. So, my tips are definitely, try to find, call up wherever you live, call up your PADI dive store and see if they have somebody on staff. And if they don't, say, I would really love and encourage you guys to get somebody on staff because it's expanding, but we're not quite there yet. But again, there's other organizations like mine that really kind of that help people with disabilities get into the water and learn how to dive. And mine is free of charge. Like the financial barrier for people with disabilities, we have to pay for medical equipment and supplies. And so I didn't want that to be a barrier for them. So, but definitely keep encouraging and pushing for sure. Yes. And I think I want to,
oh
yeah, go for it.
I actually work in accessibility. So I totally understand that. And for us, it's it's not just about accommodating, but including, for people with disabilities, especially right at the core of the environment and then the organization and all of your plans it's not just the materials that it goes beyond that from the company in itself and the dive shop that it's let's say, I need to set up a ramp. I need to have maybe the instruction is we need something else that's Braille or maybe it's an audio thing. You have to, it's diversity inclusion is intersecting so many different things. So we just have to start thinking more beyond and out of the box. And if we don't know, we should just ask the people that, those communities and what do you need and how can I help you and how can I advocate for you? And that so we can include you in this community.
Yeah, totally well said.
Authentically as well, and promote it and share it and show it. Right. I think that's important too. I mean, we can talk about, feeling like you belong and not just kind of being pandered to, and then totally. Accessibility from, all different angles. Right. Yeah.
And I guess kind of going on along the lines of encouragement before we wrap up with our last question, thoughts on what is it like? Because I feel like, we've heard this word imposter syndrome, and that refers to when somebody is really actively trying to be a part of a space where they're not necessarily represented all the time, but there can be thoughts that are kind of hard to fight, right? So you're doing this physical fight of trying to actually become a scuba diver, and you're also doing that mental fight of self-reassurance and self-encouragement all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely want to just kind of talk with the group about how that might be different geographically, right? So I'm here in California, and yes, while I do feel that there are not as many divers that look like me, I have access to a pool, right? So that kind of already opens a couple of doors. So if we're talking with folks who just swimming alone, Weldon, you mentioned this, maybe you can kind of touch more. Swimming alone is step one for many people. And just getting there and seeing themselves in the water. So why don't you touch base on that?
Well, I just want to shout out to Patty, first and foremost, for embracing free diving. I think that snorkeling and free diving, and scuba diving all have their place. It all gives us, it's all, we get our eyes underwater, right? But needless to say, you're, without a tank and regs and weights and all that, it's way more accessible. You don't need all the kit. And I want to share with everyone locked in that the most memorable experiences that I've had in memory have been with mask, snorkel, and fins alone, whether it's swimming with sharks, migrating humpback whales, wild dolphins. It's been without all the, I guess, bulky equipment that you would, typically see a scuba diver in. So again, shout out to the free diving community and for Patty bringing that, sort of to the forefront. It's pretty cool to see like a free diver on Scuba Magazine. I'm kind of like,
yeah, totally.
That's kind of interesting. So I think just by being diverse, if you will, in the sport, and just putting your eyes on the water, no matter what gear or regalia you have on, is important. Because it's crazy. I mean, there's an analogy of, going to a circus as an example and just looking at the outside of the tent, when all the action is happening inside, underneath. That's how I look at the ocean and the experiences. But yeah, I mean, if anything, I'd love to see more people sharing their journeys and just documenting the process with a phone.
Yeah.
Share your journey with the world, put yourself out there. There's a question in the chat about like, how to sort of advocate for some of the different things. I think I've lost it in the thing, but just share your journey, you guys. Create an account on social and post your journey. That's the one of the best pieces of action I can share, and find people online across the world that do what you do and love what you love, and you find like-minded divers that could be on the other side of the world, but you can connect now and to call and do what we're doing. It's so amazing. Again, I mentioned my age earlier, but I grew up in an era where there was no internet, you guys. Like, I want to stress that, like, I had dial-up in 1995, which some of you guys might not even know what that is. Burning CDs was a thing. So it's just amazing. The technology right now is allowing us to have this live conversation
for sure
across the world. So use this tech, and that's my background. Tech is my thing. To just get your message out there and share your journey.
Absolutely. You never know who is sharing.
You never know.
Challenge.
Like one of the things that I think, like for social media at least, is that like they say like, okay, I need to have this much followers first, or like whatever. But honestly, it's I think you have to step back and like, if you're able to inspire just like one person to do something and to get out there, like that's more than enough. That's like, you're creating a space for somebody to join it, So I think definitely that's a really great point from Weldon to just continue sharing your story and raising your voice, really.
Yeah.
Yes. Sure. And I also myself learned how to swim as an adult. And that was something that I think coming into my aquatic journey, I was very shy about sharing. But then I realized that that's also just a part of my journey. The challenges that we face make us who we are and shape us into who we are, and our ability to have compassion for other people.
Yeah.
So yes, I really agree with that. I think our last question, we'll give it to our younger listeners, and in kind of what would we give out, to younger listeners who feel that maybe they're a little apprehensive, or for whatever reason, diving might not feel for them, whether it's their background, whether it's their gender, sexual orientation, or just whatever it might be, to really keep them going, to keep them motivated. What can we tell our younger listeners in the context of this discussion with diversity and inclusion?
Oh man, for me, like, I guess, be patient with yourself. Like, don't feel rushed or pushed that you have to accomplish a certain task, or, I think that's what's so great about adaptive diving, is the fact that instructors do have to be more patient with people with disabilities. So, I think really kind of, if diving's not your thing, like Weldon said, there's so many different ways you can be involved with, kind of the ocean space. You don't have to be a diver to appreciate what we have, the diversity underwater. But really kind of be patient with yourself and try to get to know yourself, so that way you know where to go from there, is kind of my tip, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe I should rephrase it. I meant that in the terms of maybe they feel like diving isn't for them, but really want to get involved. But these kind of barriers that we were just talking about. Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts? Oh, Weldon and Alexa.
It's interesting. I'm just trying to put myself in real world situations. I know whenever I visit my old primary school, one of the first things I highlight to the kids, I kind of go off script and I just tell them, look, I sat in these holes, I sat in this room, walked these same halls as you guys. Because one thing to point out is most of the time in my country, when someone is speaking about the ocean and ocean health and ocean advocacy and conservation, they tend not to be Bermudian. They tend not to look like me or talk like me. So I break that right away. And I'm like, look, my grandma's house, like where I grew up in, is just on the road across Wellington, and I went to this school, and this is why I feel that the ocean is important. And we've referred to this a few times as a journey, and I want to let the young people watching know that it's a journey. I think about the Lord of the Rings, right? Like that was a journey to get the ring to Mordor. It wasn't like a one episode thing, right? So, I've been in the space for over 10 years, and it doesn't matter whether you're just getting started, you're going to get started tomorrow, whether you've been, a seasoned oceanographer like Dr. Earl. Like, we all have a part to play in like just recognizing how important the ocean is to our survival. And I love to just correlate ocean health with human health. And then sometimes I speak to just the how it provides food for us here on this little island. It provides, protection from storm surge and swell with hurricanes. It just does so much. And I try to use, stories to help light those bulbs in the young minds. And they say, okay, well, I'm not too keen to dive at night or to, do the cave diving, but sure, I'll come snorkeling and take some pictures of some sea hares and nudibranch and do some baseline coral stuff, and then we'll see how things go. But yeah, like one thing I wanted to mention during this stream is like evolving to where you can have a career in the ocean space as well is a topic that is often overlooked. We had a virtual career fair here just recently speaking to that, because, your love of the ocean, it's wonderful if you can find a career where you can make a living from it too. So maybe that's something that we can, Patty can help facilitate in the future about jobs in and out of the diving industry, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I'm in marine contracting, so I'm not even in the science side at all. Citizen science, sure, but there's so much to do, and it's so much worth fighting for out there too, you guys. So that's why I think we do what we do.
It doesn't just have to be a hobby. It can be a life-changing, purposeful.
Yep.
Yes, that's a big thing to emphasize. Cody, from Cody, be patient, everyone, with yourself.
Just
Be patient with yourselves.
Be patient. It's a
From
journey.
Weldon, it's a long journey and potentially could be a career. So keep that in mind. And then Alexa, why don't you sign us off with one last message to the young listeners?
I thought we had an hour.
Oh,
No, we don't.
The pressure. I would just say to take that first step.
Mhm.
That's a message, and like if you're able to, sorry, but like take that the first dive in and see how it goes, and you can try again and ask for help, and there's always going to be a community there to lean on. Like Patty has a great community that they're always support. Like we have like Patty Women's Day coming up, so I think if there's anything, you can join those like community events.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and starting on land too. So even if you can't exactly get in the water right away, that's a wonderful thing for everyone to remember. July 17th is Patty Women's Dive Day, and I think I just want to say thank you, everyone. My gosh, I've been touched, I've been moved, I've been inspired, and hopefully all the listeners, you too. Thank you for your excellent questions. Thank you for staying engaged, and thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights. Just such a pleasure to be having a chat with you all and meeting you all in this way. So
cool.
Same here. Thank you guys so much.
This is fun.
That's it. We're gone.
That's a wrap.